and welcome back to my podcast. There's been a bit of a gap since the last one. I do apologise. But today we were getting ready this morning for breakfast and things like that. And I found myself calling out to my son and he wasn't responding to me. Now, in the past, I used to get so annoyed at that because we spent years taking him to audiology. We thought that there was some kind of hearing problem going on. He was literally under audiology for about 8 years. And every time we would go, they would say, there's nothing. Every so often, occasionally we'd go, because we were going like every 6 months, because I was convinced that he couldn't hear me because he wasn't responding to me, and I would get so angry with him. And then every time we go, they say, no, there's nothing. Every so often, they would say, his ear canal is very tiny, so it might be that it's getting clogged up with things, and things like blue ear were mentioned. Blue ear was never present during any of our appointments, but they would say that this can kind of come and go sporadically. So that was kind of a bit of an explanation, but it wasn't really kind of a definitive answer. But I would find myself kind of just getting so cross with him because he wouldn't respond to me. And so I would repeat myself. But of course, every time I would repeat myself, the tone of my voice would change. I would get more angry, and then to the point where I would find that the first time he would respond to me, it was like the 5th time that I've done it. So by then I was annoyed and it was so obvious in my voice. And so he would then respond kind of in that combative way. So he would then be really defensive in the way that he was responding. And I'd be like, but if you just responded the first time, it was my nice, calm, Miss Hooley voice at that point. Sorry if you don't get that reference to Balmorey. But I would try and be so lovely and kind and soft and gentle. But, after the 5th time, that would have gone out of the window. And the longer this went on for, the more frustrated I would become. And so the quicker I would be to get to that point where I was really annoyed with him and angry. And so it was just really, really difficult. And I had no idea that this was all to do with neurodivergence. And so if you were at that point where you're like, oh my gosh, every time I call them, they just don't respond. There could be some other things going on here. So in this episode, I want to talk to you about 3 potential things that could be related here to what you are experiencing, and why, if we simply approach this as a choice that they are making to defy us and to ignore us and to not respond to us, then we are, number one, potentially really getting it wrong. We are completely misinterpreting what they are doing, which is further adding to their feeling of disconnect, because they're thinking, oh, mom or dad don't understand what's going on. I'm not trying to ignore them. I hadn't heard them call my name. And you're, of course, thinking, of course you heard me. My voice is loud enough. You haven't got a hearing problem. So I want to just kind of help you to understand some of the things that could be going on. And I want to give you a really, really simple hack that will help you to be able to get their attention without getting to the point where you're all really frustrated. So the 1 finger trick. Okay, so I want to explain to you 3 things that are potentially going on that are preventing your child from instantly responding to what you are saying. And when you understand these 3 things, it might help you to feel less frustrated by the whole situation, and it might help you to kind of follow through on the tip that I'm going to give you for how you can get their attention in a more just in a nicer, calmer, more connected way. Okay, so the first thing that you need to be aware of is something that is called monotropism. Okay, so the title ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that deficit word, I just have a real problem with that, and so do many people in this field, because actually our children do not have a deficit of attention. They actually have the opposite of that. They have an abundance of attention. They are able to pay attention in absolute abundance to everything. The deficit or the challenge or the barrier that they have is that they are less able to filter out the stuff that is not important, the irrelevant stuff. So right now, while I'm recording this episode, I can hear, when I listen in carefully, I can hear like a buzz from the laptop that I'm recording this on. There's also building work going on next door, but one here. So there are things I can hear in the background. But as a neurotypical person, I am very easily able to filter out those sounds because right now they're not important to what I'm doing. And it's very easy for me to just go, right, the importance is what I'm actually doing and like the sound of my own voice and thinking about what I'm talking about. And the noise from the laptop or the noise from the builders is not disturbing me whatsoever. Now, for our children, that is not the case, okay? For our children, they are not able to filter out the things that are less important. This is why they become so overwhelmed, because when they are trying in their classroom to listen to the teacher's voice, the sound of the noise, the lights buzzing, the sound of the electricity that's running through the classroom, the sound of the staff in the dinner hall setting out all the tables and chairs down the corridor, all of those things are basically filtering into their brain at the same volume. They are paying the same amount of attention to all of those things. So, I mean, just talking about it makes me feel absolutely exhausted. So for our children, they have to work so hard at just focusing on what the teacher's saying. So if they are focusing all their attention on just what the teacher's saying, and then their friend starts talking to them or trying to get their attention, well, they are trying to focus all their attention on the teacher. So now they are ignoring their friend because they're taking so much of their brain space trying to just focus on the things that, on the thing that they know that's where I need to focus on my attention. So it's exhausting for them, isn't it? And it explains a lot about when they come home and they kind of all of this kind of tension is released and why we often see so many meltdowns at home. It's not just because the work is too hard, or it's not just because they're struggling with friendships, or it's not just because it's all of the things. It's all of the things that overwhelm them. But the reason for me telling you this is the fact that whilst that is the case, they are also very, very good at being able to focus in on something that really motivates them. So we talk a lot about special interests, things that our children are able to really focus in on. So for my son, if your children are anything like my son, those special interests will actually vary quite frequently. So he doesn't necessarily have this one thing that he has been completely like obsessed with since, you know, forever and continues to be. He has something that he becomes very, very obsessed with for a period of 2 or 3 weeks. And then it moves on. And that thing that took up so much of his time and his interest before, that no longer is of interest to him. And now he's got a new thing. Now, we call this monotropism. When our children are able to really focus in on something that is really, really kind of motivating for them, something that's given them loads of dopamine hits. Now, for the purpose of what I'm talking about in this episode, I'm talking about getting their attention. If our child is kind of in a bit of a monotropic state where they are totally absorbed by this thing, whether it's like these special interest videos that they're watching on YouTube, or whether it's a book that they're really focusing in on, or whether it's a game that they're playing that's taking up all of their attention. If they are in a monotropic state, they are literally like now honing in, hyper focusing on this thing in front of them. It means that on the kind of in a rare, as a rare occasion, they are actually now filtered. They have actually filtered out all of the other stuff. It means that when you're calling their name, They're not ignoring you. They are hyper-focused on the thing that they are hyper-focused on. So they are in a monotropic state at this point. So it doesn't matter how many times you call them, they are not going to pick up on that because they're hyper-focused in. So I want you to think about that, you know, when you last kind of had one of these conflicts where you were calling them and calling them and calling them, and in the end you were just yelling at them. And then they kind of had no choice but to notice your voice, because at that point it was really loud and it was really aggressive and it was really threatening. And at that point their brain's gone, threat alert. And that is potentially the first time that they've heard your voice. And imagine like that's not what you were intending at all. In fact, the first time that you said it, you probably were overly lovely when you said it to them. And so we've got to think about that. So is your child like hyper focused on a particular thing that is of real interest to them at that moment? And are you trying to get their attention verbally when they're just kind of not in the state that they can do that? So think about that. Okay. So that's the first one, this kind of monotropic states that they can get into. And remember how challenging it is for most of the time where they're not in this monotropic state and everything is entering their brain at the same volume, in the same kind of level of intensity. So these monotropic states must feel really kind of relieving for them, because they are now like super focused on this thing that is actually bringing them joy. Must be a lovely feeling for them. And then they hear us go, I've called you 75 times. Why are you ignoring me? Okay, so that's one thing. Okay, the second thing is around sensory processing. Now we have 8 sensory systems. Most of us know about the 5 sensory systems: sight, sound, touch, smell. What was the other one? Taste. Most of us know about those 5 senses. Okay, there are actually 3 other hidden senses that we only start to really know about when we start to understand about neurodivergence. But auditory processing is one of the 5 that we do generally know about. Now, for many neurodivergent people, there will be at least in one of the 8 sensory systems, there will be in at least one of them, there will be some difference in the way that their brain processes the information that comes into their body. Okay, so for some children, that auditory processing can just look very different for them than it does with their neurotypical peers. So it can mean that when sounds enter their ear canal, the way that the brain processes that can sometimes get a little bit muddled up. So they don't automatically hear the things in the same way that we would expect them to hear the things. So again, it could be to do with the sensory processing rather than there being like a mechanical issue that audiologists would pick up on. It's not about the mechanics of the ear. So I know, as I've said, I took my son to audiology for such a long time and the mechanics were all fine. So the audiologists were kind of like, no, it wasn't the mechanics of the ear. It was the brain and the way the brain processed that auditory information. So that can be different sometimes. So expecting our children to just hear what we're saying and respond to it instantly is not necessarily helpful for them. So there can be other things going on around that sensory input. And the third thing is related to that, but I wanted to talk about processing time. Because of everything that I've talked about, because of this idea that our neurodivergent children's brains can be so overloaded with so much input that's coming at them from so many different places, it's often very difficult for them to instantly respond to something that needs a response. Okay, so the way that our brains process information is that we take the information in, then we translate the information, then we decide on what a suitable response is going to be, and then we have to execute that suitable response. Now, for a neurotypical person, that process can happen almost instantaneously. So for lots of neurotypical children, you say their name, they instantly go, oh, mum wants my attention, they turn and they are totally on it. For many neurodivergent children, that process takes longer. Now, what we often do as parents is we instantly expect our children to respond. And when they don't respond instantly, then we get annoyed, and then we will either kind of go, oh, maybe they didn't understand, so maybe I need to say it in a different way. So we'll rephrase what we said almost instantaneously. So we are now giving them more input again. But actually they might not have yet processed the first input that we gave them. So now we've given them another one. They need to start the process of processing it again. And then they still don't respond. So we go, oh, hang on a minute. I've said it twice now. You do understand. Now we start getting a bit cross. So now we say it again, but now our tone has changed. And now we're saying things like, I've asked you already once. You need to respond to me. And then we're getting cross. And they are just getting, I don't know what to do. And they are struggling to process the information. Okay. We need to understand that many of our children need a bit longer to be able to process the information. And one of the things that I have literally done as an experiment is I have started to count. So when I say something to my son, I mean, it happens less now because it's in my head. I totally get it. It's become like a muscle, like just a response for me now. But for my son, when I first started to become aware of this, I would literally count. Okay, so if I said something to him, if I knew I had his attention, and I would say, ask him a question or give him an instruction or something like that, in my head, I would count, and I would see how long it took him to be able to take in what I'd said, to work out what I'd said, and then to work out an appropriate response, and then to do the thing or to give me a verbal response. And my magic number is 15. So when I say something to my son, I literally count to 15. If he hasn't responded to me in those 15 or by the end of the 15 seconds, then sometimes I'll think about rephrasing, or I think maybe he didn't actually hear me, or whatever it is. But very often on that 15th second, he will respond. And when I was able to see that in real time, when I was able to see, oh my gosh, he just needed a bit longer to be able to respond to that thing, it just massively reduced the pressure on me, because I could think, oh, he just needed a bit longer. Just like if we had a child who had some kind of physical impairment, say a child had broken their leg, well, we would wait longer for them to walk to us, because we'd understand that it's going to take them longer to physically get to us, because their leg is sore and then they're hopping or they're hobbling or whatever. They're not going to be able to run the way they normally do. It's really easy when something is visible to us. When it's not visible, it becomes more difficult. And that time, those 15 seconds are completely invisible. But for many neurodivergent children, and people really, but children especially, they can take anywhere between 5 and 30 seconds on average to be able to process the information that comes into their brains and to then be able to respond appropriately. And so I will set you that task of just counting. Just see, if you ask them something and then count, how long on average is it taking for them to process that information and then to respond? So is it that they are ignoring you? Or is it that they actually just needed a little bit longer to be able to work out what it is that you're asking of them? Okay. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about is how we get that attention in the first place. Because if they are in a monotropic state and they're not listening, then they're filtering out any of the sounds around them. Or if their ears and their brain are not kind of joined up in the way that we expect it to, and the sound is not getting processed in the way that we expect. Or if our children just need a bit longer to be able to take in information, then we need to make sure that we set the groundwork up appropriately. And the way that I do that is so very, very simple. And it is just simply by making sure that I have got their attention before I start shouting, before I start yelling, before I start calling their name, because I don't know if he is in a place where he can receive that information at the moment. So what I do is I approach him literally with a finger. I'll tap him on the shoulder, or I'll get, squeeze his knee or whatever it is. I will give him that physical contact, and then he will kind of come out of his monotropic state, or he will look up from whatever he's doing, or he will be in a more receptive state to be able to listen to what I'm saying. And at that point, I can then say in my nice, kind, calm voice whatever it is that I wanted to say to him, without feeling angry and annoyed at him and feeling like, oh, he's ignoring me again. And then when I say the thing, I can then wait the 15 seconds for him to be able to respond to me. So this has gone on a bit longer than I expected, but I hope that that's been helpful to you, to just kind of think, oh, right, okay. It's not just that they're ignoring me, but that there are actual real factors here that are related to their neurodivergence that could be impacting on their ability to just simply instantaneously respond to the things that I'm saying. So I would love to know if any of this has resonated with you, if you are going to try the one finger trick, or if you are going to just kind of find out what is your magic number. For me, it's 15 seconds. And it really helps. It helps me to just feel more regulated, that I am going to give him that little bit of extra time. I am going to physically approach him. Now, these things, yes, they take us, an extra few seconds. I have to walk from where I am to where he is to get his attention. But I would much rather that than have a scale 5 tsunami type meltdown ensue because we are both in conflict with each other. So I would rather take that extra 30 seconds than take the next 3 hours where we're both screaming and yelling at each other. So, and I'm sure you would too. So please let me know if this has been helpful to you. Please let me know what it is that you are particularly struggling with, so that it can inspire a future episode here. Please just let me know. Come over to Instagram, let me know in the DMs what you are, whether you're finding these things helpful, and giving me some ideas about things that I can do in the future that will really help you. Thank you so much.